Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony, and I hope you're all doing fantabulous. And fantabulous, by the way, is a word that I made up. It's fantastic, fabulous, put together, twice as nice. It saves time. Right?
It's brilliant.
Thank you. My special guest today is Dr. Kevin Schwandt, professor of musicology and ethnomusicology, writing, and has taught transnational perspectives on gender, race, sexuality, and class, and has also taught queer theory and a myriad of other subjects, too numerous to mention here. And full disclosure, Kevin, I read your CV, and it just goes on and on and on, and I just want to thank you so much for being here today. I mean, it's an amazing CV, and I just want you to know that.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, may I call you Kevin? Is that
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, and also we have to say Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride.
For everyone out there, and to you, Kevin, as well.
And to you.
It's a very scary time in our community right now, so being proud of who you are is very essential, and that's why we're out there in great numbers, either protesting or having pride festivals, because we're not afraid to be ourselves anymore.
That's right.
Been there, done that.
That's right.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anyway, so the first question I usually ask my guests is foundational. So can you tell us where you were born, raised, went to school, and anything else you want to add to that?
Sure. I was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm a child of the public school system of La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is actually kind of like meaningful to me, both in that I'm a strong supporter of public education, but also before I was born, my grandfather was the superintendent of that particular school district, and so it always felt kind of special to be where he had worked and be in a district that he had sort of helped to shape. I went to college at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, and dropped out pretty dramatically, dropped out of Luther College. I moved to the Twin Cities at that point. I worked as a preschool teacher, first an aide and then an assistant preschool teacher for a few months before going back to school and graduating from Hamline University with a degree in English and music. Then I moved to Massachusetts, where I studied music composition at the University of Massachusetts and got a master's degree there, and then decided to come back to the Twin Cities to do a doctorate in musicology and ethnomusicology at the University of Minnesota. Over the course of that time, I've had a lot of different opportunities and work experiences, but primarily within the field of education, dealing with communication, culture, history, and particularly focused on ideas of identity, whether that is gender, sexuality, race, class, what have you, but different ways that people identify and different ways that groups of people are categorized and sort of put into groups, and how those groups can be, the labeling of those groups can be, on the one hand, harmful, but on the other hand, a source of empowerment and activism.
Mm-hmm. And is that LGBTQ plus IA and all that, that's... every time we look at our community, we always include more people. If you notice, that plus came along recently, because when I was growing up, it was LGBT,
right,
and that was it.
Right.
So, how do you feel about that? The additions of all these other people who feel left out as well.
Well, I think it's indicative of the underlying philosophies of that sort of pull us all together, which is inclusion, and is accepting and understanding and celebrating people's differences. It's also important to note that within the LGBTQ plus community, not all groups are treated in the same way, and so solidarity can be difficult sometimes to achieve. I certainly hope this Pride Month that there's a particular focus among everyone in the community on the experiences of gender nonconforming and transgender people, because The vitriol seems to be coming in particular toward them at the moment. It always has been sort of that way.
Yeah.
But right now, I think is an especially scary time for them. And so it's really, as we celebrate Pride, I think it's very important to understand that the oppression and the marginalization that we experience is not experienced in the same way by everyone. Mm-hmm. But we do have that solidarity, which I think is really important, and
Exactly.
we need to demonstrate empathy for other people who are suffering through this.
I couldn't agree more. And we're going to be talking a lot about that later in the show. First, I want to talk about your, what you've been teaching, publishing, and et cetera. Your resume, by the way, was so extensive. I guess we can start with a question with reference to your master's of music composition. Can you talk about the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, if I'm pronouncing that great?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
That's how I see it, I guess.
Okay. Song cycle on the poem by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, of course, for those out there who don't know, is a very famous poet. Mm-hmm. And why you were fascinated with that.
Yeah, it's really complicated. In academia, sometimes when you are trying to work on a creative project, you have to do something that's meaningful to you, but that also meets the requirements of the program,
right?
And that people are going to look at and say, that this is what the kind of work that we want coming out of this particular program. And so that project came out of me sort of trying to negotiate things that I might have wanted to do a little bit more, but still meet the requirements of the program. So the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, T.S. Eliot is an incredibly dense and difficult poet. And so I was able to kind of just pull out meanings in the poetry through the music, through the emphasis in the music, simply, to kind of engage in claiming something as my own, I guess, claiming that expression and having it mean something to me in particular, even though I maybe didn't identify with the poem itself that much. Mm-hmm. That was really my goal in my composition studies, was this, how can music help us understand other cultural products, other art, in a way that is supportive of us. And so the music is sort of my thing that I kind of put on top of the words, someone else's words, my music. It creates a different work of art.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Prefacing the next question, I want you to know that I saw Rufus Wainwright in concert, and what a voice on that man.
Yes.
My goodness gracious. My husband, full disclosure, is a big fan of Rufus. I didn't know much about him. I'm an older guy. My husband's a few years younger than I am. But watching him perform, and he did a song about the twice impeached ex-president, which was hilarious. Mm-hmm. I would recommend you all go see him and listen to that. Anyway, could you discuss your doctoral dissertation on Oh, What a World, Queer Masculinities, the musical construction of a, how would you say that, reparative cultural historiography?
Yes. Yeah, we'll go with that.
It's overwhelming to me to pronounce. And the music of Rufus Wainwright.
Sure. In my dissertation, I took the music of Rufus Wainwright as sort of an example of, just what I was talking about in the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I believe that Rufus Wainwright takes existing cultural products and finds meaning in them that speak to a specific identity formation. And it's one that I identify with strongly. I became very interested in the construction of masculinity. What is masculinity? How do we culturally define what makes a man, I guess? Because I think that has a lot of important implications for how marginalized people are treated. So the idea of the reparative historiography, and those are obnoxious words, but really what that means is in a culture that has sometimes explicitly excluded you, or not even excluded you, but used you as the scapegoat or the villain, or has reviled you, how can you get sustenance out of the things that culture produces? And I think that Rufus Wainwright has figured out ways to do that, to express his own identity through references to cultural ideas that just are explicitly that are meant to exclude.
Right. And masculinity is really a very wide spectrum, I think, in my book. Because you hear people talking about it all the time, and there's even these right-wingers who talk about masculinity. I think one of the senators, Senator Hawley, wrote a book about hyper-masculinity, and there's not enough masculinity.
Right.
But what's the definition? Like smacking a woman around, is that masculine? Or being homophobic, is that,
Right.
And can you briefly explain that word masculinity and why it's not, there's no specific definition for it?
It's a troublesome word, and yet it's one that gets thrown around a lot and used in sometimes maybe destructive ways. But we've culturally constructed this binary between feminine and masculine, as if those are two sort of pre-existing concepts.
Right.
I don't believe that those things. I think those are things we have made up.
Yes, I do too.
Collectively made up, sort of, over history and culture. And so, when growing up, I'm a cisgender gay white man. Growing up, my minority status was not visible. It was something that was internalized. If you knew me, I think I probably had some behaviors that might be coded as feminine when I was a child, and probably still do to this day. That might be coded by feminine from somebody else. But if you were to just look at me, I looked like the dominant culture, right? But I was feeling that I wasn't. I knew that I wasn't. Other people didn't necessarily know that. But the thing that was really driving some of my mental health problems when I was a kid was I wasn't adequately male. I wasn't adequately male to the expectations of the people around me. And so that I think that drove why, I think that drove some of my research and my writing and my ideas later, just my personal experience of, well, what do you mean I'm not a man? Because, like I said, I am cisgender. I identify as male, and yet there was something about me that wasn't enough male.
Yep, I agree with you, because I walk the streets with white skin, and I'm an older man. So the assumption is that I'm how would you say, I'm normal. I guess that's the word I'm going to use, which I hate that word. But so people look at me and they don't find me intimidating, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
You're centered and perceived to be you use the word normal, and I think it's okay to use that word not because it is normal, but because that's the way people describe it.
Exactly, and I dress, very, plain, of a plain chain.
Yeah.
I wear jeans, T-shirts, tennies. I'm not, I don't wear my hair long. I don't wear makeup. Right. I'm kind of like, how would you say, safe. And I have friends that don't look that way, and they're not conforming to society's expectations of what a man should, quote unquote, man. That's why when I hate that, there was like a movie out recently. Some right wing person put out "What is a Woman?" Have you heard about that movie?
I don't think I've heard about that particular thing, but I have an idea of where that might be going. Look it up online.
It's really gross. But women, what is a woman? When people have a problem answering it, it's because it's very complex.
Right.
The genitalia has nothing to do with it.
Right.
It's so you're a woman because maybe that's how you feel yourself, or I don't claim to know what a woman is. So that's why I think on the left we don't answer that question.
Yeah, well,
You know?
it's tricky because I think we all have a sense of our own identity that we have personally, but it's also shaped by the ways that other people have, constructed these structures or whatever. The way that those terms are used in in everyday language, that does shape the way we perceive ourselves. And so, I can say that there's no core to those concepts, and yet those concepts are still affecting me every day.
Right.
So just because something is socially constructed doesn't mean it doesn't impact the world.
Exactly. Yeah. So moving on to your extensive, I keep calling it an extensive resume. You taught many different dimensions of writing for your doctoral students as well, right? And can you briefly discuss how writing support and instruction is so vital for students? And maybe you could throw in a few secrets for our listeners, maybe little tips.
Sure. In my career, a big part of my career has been working in the field of writing. Even though my background is in music, my background really is writing about music. That's really what musicology is to a large extent. And writing is, it's a way, it's self-expression, but I also really believe it's a way of enhancing your own self-awareness. When you are challenging yourself to put the ideas in your head on paper, and there are various different ways that you might do that on paper. There are many different ways to say the same thing, but the choices that you make and how you say it has to do with how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see the subject that you're writing about. Writing is thinking. Writing is not just expression, it's thinking. And so, I found that the more empowered a student, or I also do freelance consulting often with doctoral students who just need a coach. I often find that the more empowered they feel just in their writing, the more empowered they feel to actually come up with interesting ideas, about their subject matter.
Of course.
If you feel confident that you can convey the thing that's happening in your brain, you feel more confident going out there and putting more things in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you've submitted many articles as well and works for publications, again, too numerous to mention. However, one publication that is apropos of Pride Month is, quote, "The Erotics of an Oil Drum, Queercore, Gay Macho, and Defiant Sexuality of Extra Fancy Cinnamon." Cinnamon or cinnamon?
It's Cinnamon. Yeah.
Cinnamon. In 2009 is when you...
It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah. I just found the title just crazy fascinating. Could you give us a brief synopsis of what this is about this publication is about?
Sure. Yeah, well, and the title of it is, there's it's meant to have a little shock value in it.
It does,
You have to get attention sometimes.
Of course.
But really, that came out of, again, my thinking about the concept of masculinity. What does that mean? Extra Fancy was a band that was sort of an alternative band in the 90s. Some might call it post-punk or something like that in terms of genre. But what was really interesting about the band was that the lead singer was openly gay and presented in a very, very aggressive, almost, skinhead kind of...
Hyper-masculine.
Hyper-masculine, really aggressive... an aggressive portrayal of his masculinity, he's very clearly playing with the idea of masculinity.
Yeah.
And the songs were explicitly about homosexuality, were about...
Positive or negative?
Well, positive.
Okay, good.
But also violent in a way of... So there are songs that are about gay bashers. And in the song, he fights back, and
Good.
And so, maybe not fighting. I wouldn't advise the.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
The stories, but but it's really it's explicit, and it was at a time when I think the dominant narrative. This is even before the notion of marriage equality was really the forefront of, at least for cisgender
right, it was the 90s,
gay people.
right?
Yeah, where I think the interest was more in, but the focus was more on physical harm and hate crime and things like that. And here you had this album that's about a gay man fighting back physically in a lot of cases. And so I was intrigued by that because it was he was clearly playing with those tropes of gender, those tropes of the macho man kind of thing, and flipping it a little bit.
Right, yeah.
And so, using a musical genre that hadn't always been perceived as that open to homosexuality, using that genre to express this defiant, angry rejection of homophobia was really interesting to me.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I mean, it kind of sounds like the flip side of Prince, because Prince was very feminine.
Yeah.
If you saw him, he was like this big, wore high heels, makeup, long hair, and the whole deal. But he sang about heterosexual, masculine, ideas of how to pick up a woman and I'm going to make love to you, and all this very heteronormative stuff. But if you looked at him, you'd be like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right. Right.
So it's I mean, I get it. Yeah.
It's those markers of gender are really an interesting way for artists of all kinds to sort of play around with things and subvert expectations.
Absolutely. Yeah, interesting. You have also participated in presentations and workshops over the years. Now, Lady Gaga and queer politics was one that caught my eye. I was like, Lady Gaga. Okay, everybody loves Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like the Madonna of the newer generation. I guess there's a newer one now. I mean,
I think
Gaga's
so.
kind of old now, I guess, right?
Yep, doing different things.
Yeah, because Streisand was like even before Madonna, and then before that was Judy Garland, because, during Stonewall, the reason the whole thing was started is when Garland died, all these gay men were just so depressed and upset.
Right.
And then they couldn't take the abuse anymore, and they fought back.
Yeah.
But so you've had our gay queens, I guess I call them. The women that we look up to that had our back over the years. So, so what's the connection, you think, between Gaga and the LGBTQ community?
Well, I think she's made that pretty explicit in a lot of ways by simply being an advocate and being an activist.
Right. And the songs,
and of course some of the songs are quite explicit about that. But even when she's not being explicit about that, there's a quality to the particular type of camp that she's engaged in. Or I'm not sure that she does it. I haven't been keeping up with her career too much lately, but at the time, it was this over-the-top campy performance that spoke, I think, to the role of camp in queer life. That's not just gay men. And I think it's also, also Judy Garland and Stonewall, it wasn't just about gay men. It was, being led by transgender people and drag queens.
You're right. I
lesbians.
Left that out. Yes, sorry.
Well, right, but that's the narrative that we have. I think it really is that there is an affection for this sort of central figure who represents. Judy Garland, for example, like part of it was the fact that everyone knew she was struggling so much, and she just kept going. It just seemed like she kept going, and somehow that connects. There's a sort of a metaphor for, all of the mental abuse and hardship that people in the LGBTQ plus community have to deal with, and yet we keep moving forward. I think that's part of it. But that diva worship for Lady Gaga is interesting to me because she calls her fans the monsters and all of that sort of stuff, which is she's explicitly presenting herself as a spokesperson for the outcasts, the people who have been left aside or rejected. And so I think that's a big part of her appeal.
Yes, and Madonna, I think, was a different phenomena because she came of age during the Reagan administration when everything was starting to move way to the right.
Yep.
And, everybody was getting all, I don't like to say the word religious, but you know what I mean. I mean, right-wing Christianish, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And so she decided that she was going to be out there. You remember like the big famous MTV Awards when she wore the wedding dress and she was humping the veil and she's rolling on the floor. You could see her panties. And everybody said after that performance that was the end of her career.
Right.
Guess what?
Right.
It wasn't.
Right.
They admired her. The gay community admired her for that. Said, "Good for you. I mean, you're expressing yourself.
Yeah.
You're not, playing in Miss Innocence. And that's how her fame started growing from there.
Yeah. And well, and that's one of the great powers of an artist is that they are able to sort of represent publicly and loudly, the inner feelings of their fans in a certain way, or the inner experience of their fans. And you're right. Madonna comes from is emerging from a culture that I think, to a certain extent, had been stifled or was becoming more rigid. Or I'm not quite sure exactly what the right words are for that.
I can't think of the right word either.
And
rigid is good.
like you said, she was just, I'm going to do my thing, and
exactly.
And you can do that if you have a certain amount of power. You can project an image like that I couldn't do. And so, I think that's part of the power of
and the
of
more
celebrity.
famous she got, the more out there she got. Like she did that video when she was kissing that saint on the lips, and then she did another one. You remember the video for Erotica?
Yep.
Jeez. That she did a sex book. I mean, she just did a lot of things that pushed the envelope. But she wanted to express herself. She felt that her music was the way to do it. And gay people saw that. Not that gay people are sexual, because I hate to sexualize the gay community.
Of course.
But she made it okay to be who you are. And I think that's what the gay community related to. They looked at her and said, hey, she's being herself. We want to be ourselves, too.
Well, and there's power in shocking the people who are harming you, too. So I think
exactly.
That's,
I remember the first time. I'm older than you, so I can remember when the first time I saw two guys holding hands walking down the street in Greenwich Village in New York when I was a kid, how I was like, oh, Mommy, there's two guys holding hands. She goes, yeah, they're together. My mom was more progressive than most moms, so I was lucky.
It sounds like it,
yeah. She just said, no, they're just together, and, she didn't explain, she didn't go into the sex of it,
of course.
Just like the right wing is like, they're teaching sex, Florida, they're teaching sex to our children. No, they're not.
Right.
No, they're not.
Right.
They just want you to know there are gay families. That children have two dads, children have two moms, children have one mom, children have one dad. I mean, there's a myriad of ways you can have a family, and that's all it's about. And anyway,
it's just about seeing someone's humanity.
Exactly. Also, through my legwork, I found out that you are a freelance DJ, and so was I. But I was a DJ way, way, way back in the prehistoric age when we spun vinyl. And you know what vinyl is?
I'm familiar.
Those discs with the hole in the middle.
Yes, I'm familiar with those.
I'm just kidding. You're not that super young that you would know what that is. Although,
I've seen a record.
Although people have told me they didn't know what a record was. So just letting you know that. So what music of that era would you say resonates today and you still play at clubs? And why do you think it's still popular? So, for example, I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by this question. So there was a song, it was by Gloria Gaynor. You know what I'm going to say? Not the one you think, the other one. It's called I Am What I Am.
Yep.
It was a disco song, a dance song. and the words were about be yourself. I am what I am, and you love yourself. Basically, it was a very strong message. And for years at gay pride events and gay festivals and all that, the song was like the anthem for for older gay men at that time. Mm-hmm. What about now? What would you say now?
That would be if I were playing at a gay bar, I would probably play that song.
You do still? Yeah. Wow,
yeah,
great!
I think because some of that music still resonates really strongly, and we're fortunate enough now to have a sort of a canon of gay anthems, I guess, or music and figures who have historically been associated with or supportive of the gay community, and those things are recognizable. Disco, as a genre, before it was vilified and taken down. That emerged as an expression of marginalized people, and
exactly
marginalized people having fun and experiencing their bodies. You're supposed to dance. You're supposed to move around.
Yes, it was the coming together of the African American community and the gay community,
right.
Because African Americans were also being, and still to this day, being marginalized, as well as the LGBTQ community. Yep. And it was a music that united both of us together.
That's right.
I mean, you went to gay clubs. It would be uncommon to see, a lot of African Americans in the clubs dancing with us and having a good time. And a lot of the expressions that gay men were using were from the African American community.
Right.
There was a very strong bond at that time, and that was threatening to the white community as a whole, the non-allied community, because they said, "Oh no, we can't have this." So they had disco record burnings in a lot of places because they didn't. Rock and roll was, the only way to go, and disco music had to be buried.
And when they were going through that process of just vilifying and burning the disco records and things. I think that the dominant narrative just sort of said that we're having fun and disco is stupid and this is but what they were really doing was symbolically destroying a community, and
two communities.
Yeah. Well, and the connections between those communities and more. I mean, certainly Latino community was also very much connected to disco at that time.
Oh, sure, yeah. And also white allies,
of course,
heterosexual allies that were hanging out with. We used to call it was an expression. I don't know if they use it anymore, so I'm even afraid to say it. But it was from my generation. The gay men used to call fag hags. Mm-hmm. Remember that?
Yep.
Women straight women usually who hung around with gay men,
right.
And they were super allies, and they'd have your back big time. Mm-hmm. And were dancing around the clubs with us and enjoying the music, and now today we just call them allies, right. Whether it's a man or a woman. Yeah. So anyway, I was going to ask you another question about music and DJing. Why aren't there any popular songs today about trans? Like we had the gay songs. Remember, we had "I Am What I Am." We had what's the one by Gaga?
Born This Way.
Born This Way. Mm-hmm. We had a few anthems for our community. Yeah. Do they have one, or do you know of any, or why not?
I think the why not. It has to do with the perceived danger of being out and open, I said perceived danger. It's not perceived; it's real danger.
Right.
And I think that's what it is. I think that's coming, and there probably are things that I'm just not thinking of right now that I could point to. But there are in the academic realm, there are people who are actively working on. Understanding the role of musical genre or whatever within the trans community. There has been some recent, some nice research recently about that. And for example, a friend of mine has a book about queer country music, which is it's an interesting concept to think about because that's a genre that we don't necessarily associate with being very queer.
Not at all. Is it a thing?
It is a thing. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. So I don't know. Well, we have to see. Music is such a fluid concept and industry. That I think that there is, those things will come along. Unfortunately, the trans community is still, for a lot of cisgender gay people, still is perceived as a threat to their advancements, and that's something that is very bothersome to me. Because I hope that we aren't going to think that we have marriage equality and therefore we are done.
Good point. Yeah.
I'm married, but I certainly don't. I'm legally married, and I couldn't have been years ago. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to just pull up the ladder behind me. I've got that. That's a really big deal to me. But
that's a good point.
Just because I feel like I have a little bit more access to society and to culture and to the institutions of the culture. Just because I feel like I have more access to it doesn't mean that I'm done.
Yes, and you corrected me before about Stonewall that there were trans people there.
Yes,
they had our back way back.
Absolutely.
Before there was such a big thing now. Anti-trans laws being passed around the country. They were there for us.
Yes,
and by pulling the ladder up, like you said. That would be a slap in the face to all the trans people who were there for the gay community back in the day. I think we should embrace them and have their back. And because now, back in the day, being gay was like the no-no. It was like, we were being attacked on TV and periodicals, everything. And once we gained popularity with people, once people got to know gay people and became familiar with gay people, it started to, dwindle, and now marriage even passed, which I never thought would ever happen. Yeah. And now it's their turn. Now it's the trans people's turn to get the bashing. And we need to not pull the ladder up. We need to help them out, show them that they're human as well.
That's right.
And they have every right to exist in this country just like everybody else. Yep. And so thank you for mentioning that, because I for some reason, I had a brain fart about trans people being around during Stonewall. Yeah. But anyway, the final question before we get to the shift. If I were to look at your music collection, whether on physical media or Spotify, or whatever you use, what songs, artists, and genres of music would I probably see?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you were to look at my Spotify, it is a real hodgepodge because I also, I use it to collect music for classes and things like that. So, so you're going to get, J.S. Bach on there, and you're going to get classical stuff,
right,
or organized in playlists according to what kind of a lesson I might be doing. The things that I listen to for fun tend to be just kind of poppy stuff.
Newer, older, in between.
Whatever might just pop up. I mean, as a musicologist, it's. I want to say this in a way that, music. Being a musicologist requires you to like everything, and also not necessarily like everything, because you're trained to just kind of have this analytical sort of reaction to music. And so actually when I'm working, if I'm working on something, if I'm writing something or editing something, sometimes I will listen to podcasts or talk radio or whatever, NPR.
Did you ever hear of the Downright Upright show?
Yes, and that is in fact one that's on the rotation.
Great.
And partly it's because rather than listening to musical sounds, hearing voices is a little bit more soothing for me. So I don't know. It's a weird thing. Maybe that's just in my brain.
Yeah. Well, I grew up, again, I'm older, and I always gravitated, for some reason, even back then I knew I was an activist. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I always gravitated towards songs that were motivated by helping the communities that are marginalized. I always, even when I first heard James Brown sing "I'm Black and I'm Proud," I said, "Good for you, buddy." You know, I am woman, hear me roar, Helen Reddy. I mean, because women were being abused in those days. They couldn't even get credit cards until the 70s. Right. Then you had environmental songs like anti-war songs, I should say, like What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. There were a lot of those kind of songs growing. Oh, there was Cherokee People by the Raiders, song that was against white people dominating Native American communities. Et cetera, et cetera. There was so many, but those are the songs I tend to gravitate to. Isn't that crazy for a kid?
Well, no, I don't think so, because first of all, those are all really good songs too. So I mean,
but the messages
maybe
were great.
you're driven to that as well. For me, I think when I was younger, I was obsessed with Tori Amos. I probably am still obsessed with Tori Amos, and partly it was because she played the piano, I played the piano, but also her music was so opaque and her lyrics were so strange and seemingly stream of consciousness that's how I felt. As a teenager, I felt like I'm seeing the world in some very strange way that nobody else can see it, right. And it seems like she does too, and so I felt really connected to that. So maybe less. I was attracted less to the explicit protest songs and more to the weird. I was drawn to the weirdness.
Yeah. Well, now we've come to the part of the show I like to call the shift, where I shift the questioning away from your multifaceted career and to your opinions on current events. And don't forget, the shift has an F in it, so you have to say shift, otherwise we have problems.
I'm going to do my best.
Yeah. Okay, good. As you may already know, the twice impeached former president, now remember, this is all opinion now, so this is, feel free to say what you feel, was indicted on multiple counts in the special counsel's documents case. Do you think this news will finally end his scourge on this country, or do you think he will gain more sympathy and increase in popularity? What do you think as far as that?
I think, unfortunately, there will be a surge, and possibly, I'm concerned about violence, like we saw at the Capitol and things of that nature. Because for the people who really truly support him, I don't think that I don't think there's a real limit to where they'll go. And so that frightens me. I think he's going to go away eventually, whether that's to prison or a different way. He's going to go away. My real concern is that he created this permission structure for people to just be openly hateful and openly violent.
Yes.
And that I don't think is going away soon. Yeah. And so that's something where we just have to be really vigilant about. I'm very interested in what comes from the indictment, but regardless of the outcome, we're going to have to do something. If he's in prison, his ideas and his way of behaving isn't in prison with him. It's out here with us.
Yeah, because the charges he's being charged with are multiple years of prison.
Yes.
I mean, unless President Biden wants to forgo that and say, what, he was a president, so we're going to pardon him. And
I hope not.
Well, I mean. Because President Biden doesn't come off to me as in the same way that Trump does. I mean, Trump is always like he said, "I'm your retribution."
Yes, yeah.
Biden is
very
not
scary.
into that at all.
No.
And so it'd be interesting to see because he can't. I don't think even if he won the presidency and he was in jail, would he be able to be president in jail? Or would they take him out?
I don't know. I guess that would be we'd have to figure that out.
I always thought of that. I said, geez, could you imagine? Like, he's convicted, he goes to jail, and he still runs, and he wins. God.
Yeah.
That would be the most insane. What would the world think of us at that point?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. My mental health requires me to not think about that particular possibility too much.
I know.
But it's a very real problem, because even though, I think people still write him off as a clown, and frankly, I kind of think he's a clown as well. But
I think he's worse than a clown, though.
The effect, though, if the subject of your clowning is hateful, violent, miserable stuff, then that's really scary, because that's not something to play around with.
Yes, and a friend of mine, to piggyback on what you're saying about clowns, when he refers to Trump, he doesn't refer to him as a clown. He refers. Do you ever see the movie It?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a clown.
Yeah.
But not your typical clown.
Right.
It's a very evil clown.
Yeah.
And that's probably a better way to describe him.
Oh, yes. He's definitely evil.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think some people just don't take him seriously. But we better take him seriously now, because there are real consequences to the things that he says and does.
And don't forget Baby Trump. DeSantis is not exactly, well,
he's
pure as the driven snow.
I find him
just as
terrifying.
Terrifying as well. Yeah, with the addition of Chris Christie, Mike Pence, and so many other candidates vying for the Republican nomination, do you think that such a large field of candidates will solidify a win for who, Voldemort? Or do you think another candidate will emerge and steal the Republican nomination? And to put a little addendum to this question, last night Chris Christie had a town hall on CNN, and he was the only candidate that's ever spoken in public, that's running on the Republican side, who actually demolished him, put him. Yeah. Called him every name in the book. He's this, he's that. He can't do this. He can't do. He's not trustworthy. He's a liar. And I commend him for that. To be the one to distinguish himself from the rest of the crew.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in Chris Christie's head, but I think part of it is, maybe he's having fun. I don't know, but he's a person who seems like he's able to say the things that really probably need to be said about Donald Trump. Not that I like Chris Christie very much, but I guess I do appreciate someone actually calling Trump out on things.
And he's not as dangerous as Donald Trump in my mind, but I wouldn't. Again, I would never vote for him. But if you had to put a gun to my head and said you had to vote for a Republican candidate, that was probably he'd probably be the only one I could think of that I would vote for, because he's not against democracy.
Right.
He's he understands how Donald, even Pence. They tried to kill him, for God's sake, and he's still kissing Trump's butt.
Yeah.
It just bothers me. It's just I can't stand him. I don't like a person who doesn't defend themselves. Like the same thing with Ted Cruz. He called his wife ugly. Said his father killed JFK, but yet he's kissing his butt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
it's crazy.
Yes, I just in my experience, the biggest homophobes are the weakest people, and I think that Mike Pence just is not a very strong person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I give Christie credit. I do. At least he's not afraid to say what he feels, and he's not backing down. So good for you. For the last couple of questions, let's talk about the right-wing assault on the LGBTQ community, because it's Pride Month, and we have to prop ourselves up and talk about our issues now. What are your thoughts on the Supreme Court getting ready to come down with a decision on the Colorado Christian web designer case? And do you think the court will side with the web designer or with the LGBTQ community at large? What do you think?
Well, that particular case, what little I know of it, seems so absurd that I'd like to say that the Supreme Court would side with the LGBTQ community.
You would think.
But this particular court, I don't know. So that's also really frightening, because if in this country, we have already dealt with the idea of if you're offering some public service, or you're offering a public accommodation, that has to be accessible to all people. And if this web designer is preemptively, but it doesn't seem like there's any real actual motive to this.
She wasn't sued.
So right. So I'm not really sure what's driving that for her, but that would be a pretty terrible precedent, because
the same thing with the cake guy. You know, I mean, come on, dude. Bake the cake, and if you don't want to put the little statue on the top of two guys, then you go, you know what, I can't do that. But here's the cake, and go get the thing somewhere else. I mean, you could there's so many ways to navigate that, but he had to make it, about religion,
right? Which
it's not. It's not. You're a baker. You're not a straight baker. Mm-hmm. You don't bake cakes for straight people. You have to bake cakes for everybody. Right?
In my consulting business, my editing and writing consulting business, I sometimes have clients I fundamentally disagree with, and I'm helping them get ideas that I don't necessarily like very well into shape for public consumption.
Right.
I do that because I can differentiate between my business and my personal beliefs. That doesn't mean that you want to run a business that violates your personal beliefs, but I can offer a service to someone I disagree with without violating my ethics. And I have a hard time understanding why. What is the issue? Why can't you provide the service that you are being paid for without going down the road about someone else's personal life or someone else's politics or whatever?
But why not, Kevin, why couldn't they just say, I'll give this account to one of my contract employees or something, rather than just saying, no, I'm just not going to do it. Yeah. But see, the thing is, she's not even being sued. So this is just preemptive, and she's trying to be I don't want to say the word, but she's trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. It didn't even happen.
Right.
Or
maybe just trying to make a point, or just trying to be hateful.
Yeah, exactly. But hate is a very strong emotion.
Yes,
a lot of people don't realize that. Love is strong, yes, but hate can be even stronger sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's scary. Let's just put it that way. So what are your thoughts about the Human Rights Campaign declaring a national state of emergency for the LGBTQ community and travel advisory to Florida? And what are some of some of the potential dangers you see to our community coming from the right?
Well, I think we probably are in a state of emergency in our community, and like I said earlier, I'm particularly concerned right now about violence, direct hate crimes. As an educator, I'm also very concerned about the health and safety of young people. I'm very concerned about the rates of depression and suicide, and I'm not sure that people on the right fully understand, or maybe they just don't care about the psychological damage of Ron DeSantis saying we're not going to talk about your family or whatever in school. Either they don't understand the psychological damage that does to a child, they don't care about it, or they want to damage psychologically.
Or people. All of the above.
Maybe it's all of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it is really terrible. But it's also part of the playbook throughout history. People in power, in order to maintain their power, they have to have someone to attack.
Yeah, you have to have a fall guy. You have to, because that gets butts to the polls and gets you people who will support you. And I hate to go back to the Nazis, but with Adolf Hitler, he demonized a lot of different groups, and that was his way of getting power. And I'm afraid you're right. It's a scary time because we don't know what the majority of Americans are going to do right now, because the country's getting very bizarre as far as
Yeah.
Look, I am not black, for example. You know, I'm not. I'm a white guy. But I don't like people who say, no, you can't teach AP African American studies in a school. To me, that's discrimination. Boom.
It is.
Voting rights laws, you know, the way they gerrymander these states so that black people can't vote. I mean, I'm not black, but I'm a human being, and I see injustice, and I don't think it's fair.
Right.
And I hope the rest of the country can get on that boat, on the love train, I like to call it, where everyone looks at each other as a human being. And I know I always say this on my show. People think I'm Pollyanna, you know. I'm always like, oh, you know, we are the world, we are the children, you know. But I really truly feel that way. Yeah. I do. I think if that starts rubbing off on people, maybe we can get somewhere.
I think so. Well, I think there's something to be said for, trying to expose more people to pride events and things, things like that, and to realize, pride needs to be a reflection of the history and the struggle. Pride also is joyful, and the joy that the queer community can have at times, I think, is that can bring people in, and we know that if you actually know people and you're friends with people, it's much harder to discriminate against them or to be hateful toward them. All of these transphobic politicians, like, how many out trans people are they aware of? I mean, I know that they know trans people. How many are they aware of? And because it's difficult to do something that's hateful, when you've had coffee with someone. And
right.
I don't know. I don't think I'm Pollyanna-ish, but I actually do. I agree with you. Like, there's just it's actually truly not that difficult to be kind.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to piggyback on what you just said about trans people, because the next question is, I'm going to be stating some statements and theories made by the right against trans people.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about that after,
Okay.
So attacks from the hard right on the trans community are growing with each day that passes. So, for example, this is what they talk about. I'm just going to give you a few. There's many more, but I'm going to give you a couple of things they say to give you an idea of what they're saying. For example, biological men don't belong in women's sports. That's one. The dangers of giving hormones and possibly surgery to children, and how it will decrease the future population of gays, because the children are just gay and they don't need to change their gender. They're just simply gay people, young gay people. Teachers telling children they can change their gender, and because of that, just because of them saying that, the children then are feeling they are trans, just from the fact the teacher said that. Forcing gender pronouns down everybody's throat. Why do you have to force? And I always use that example with the gender pronouns. Like, if you say, hi, my name is John. I say, okay, hi, Bill.
Right.
You don't want to be called Bill. You said your name's John. And if their pronoun is whatever they say it is, hey, what's skin off your nose to call them what they're, so things like that. So how can we and our allies stop the spread of this misinformation that will lead to the increase in transphobia and possibly resulting in harm to our trans sisters and brothers? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, that's a big one. I think for me, at the core of all of these questions is that it's very arrogant to assume that the way that you experience life and the way that you perceive the world is the only way to experience life and perceive the world. So I don't know what it's like to be a transgender person, because I'm not a transgender person. I don't need to know what it's like to be a transgender person.
Me too. Mm-hmm.
In order to show them love and respect and to want them to live happy, fulfilled lives.
I love you. See, I think you are. Again, I think the two of us are Pollyanna, because I think we're just saying what a human being would say.
Right.
I mean, they're not bothering you. They're not. And I hate that grooming term too.
Right.
They use that a lot. I forgot even to bring that one
Yeah.
up. What do you think about some of those things that I mentioned, and how do we stop that from spreading?
Well, I mean, some of those claims are just on their face stupid,
Ridiculous.
And I think it's okay to say that's just stupid, because it's not an opinion. It is a statement that certain groups of people are not real people, and that's dumb. That's just dumb.
Yeah. For example, the one that really hits me is the one about the gays.
Right.
That these trans kids are really gay.
Right.
And by you switching changing their gender, the population of gay men is going to decrease in the future. It would be like me telling you, you're really not gay, Kevin. You're really trans. So you should, even though you just want to have sex with people of your own gender or your own sex, you should have a sex change operation.
Right.
This is what you really need to do.
Right.
It sounds ridiculous.
Right. Yes, and it is ridiculous.
And it's ridiculous because people
gender and sexuality are not the same thing.
Completely different. Thank you. Completely different.
But our culture really is very much based on creating binaries. There's this or there's that, and we're not great with gray area, and we're also not great with more than two categories. And so, because of those categories, sexuality was perceived to be man, woman, and that's the only way of conceiving of sexuality because that is so ingrained in us. And with the great power of the LGBTQ plus community is that we are a direct threat to patriarchy. I mean, we're just a direct threat to that whole system, and that's why people react in this way. They're afraid that the system that they know is sort of crumbling around them. What they don't seem to acknowledge is it doesn't affect them in any way whatsoever.
I know, yeah. I mean, again, we're preaching to the choir to each other here. Yeah, but so before we close out the show, because could you believe this passed by so quickly? Is there a topic I haven't mentioned that you would like to tell the listeners about, or any other thing you would like to convey?
Well, first of all, I would like to convey Happy Pride, even though we've been talking about some dour subjects, it is okay to be happy.
Yeah,
and that might actually be what I would want to leave on. And again, these are real problems, and we need to be very concerned about them. But one of the the greatest ways to fight back is to look at the bigot in the face and say, I'm happy. That drives them nuts.
It makes them crazy. Exactly right. And you're right. These were dour subjects. But again, the reason we bring them to light is because we want the allies out there, people that are not in our community, to understand how we're feeling. I mean, I'm not a trans person, but I understand the marginalization that they're going through and how they feel ostracized from society, just like I did when I was growing up as a gay boy. So...
Well, that's because you have empathy for others, and I guess there are some people who don't, and that's really a shame.
Empathy is a very, very important feeling of an existence of humanity to me. I mean, I look at other people and I just see people. I don't care what color you are, what religion, whatever. If you're a good person, I love you, and I'll have your back for the rest of my life. Yeah. But anyway, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you for being my guest on the Downright Upright show, and happy Pride to you again.
Happy Pride.
And also to your husband, who I
thank you.
haven't met, but maybe one day I will.
Yeah.
And I would personally like to thank you for all you do on behalf of our community. And for more information on Dr. Kevin Schwandt, you can visit his website at calamuswriting.com. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's calamuswriting.com. or kevinschwandt.substack.com, right?
That's right.
Am I right?
Yep.
And to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us on the Downright Upright Show. And again, thanks so much, Kevin. I really enjoyed this. Maybe we could do this again sometime.
Absolutely. I had a great time.
It was fabulous.
Thank you so much.
And maybe I'll see you at Pride.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everybody come to Pride. Yeah. We have to show, because solidarity is so important in this day and age.
Absolutely.
And this is your host, Philip Anthony, saying happy Pride to all, and ciao for now.